have Dr. MELINA ABDULLAH, who's a professor at Cal State LA, mother of 3 LAUSD students, one of which just graduated, and founding member of BLM LA.
And PATRISSE CULLORS, one of the 3 women who founded Black Lives Matter. She's also a best-selling author and a product of LA Unified.
We also have KENDRICK SAMPSON, actor and activist. You may have seen him in shows like The Vampire Diaries or Insecure, among other film and TV shows.
And finally, Sarah DJATO. She is a rising senior at Dorsey High School in LA Unified. She's a student leader in the group Students Deserve.
We will also be utilizing the Q&A later. So if you have questions, you can go ahead and put it into the Q&A during the panel. So with that, we're going to hand it over to the panelists to tell us a little bit more about themselves and also their work within the Black Lives Matter movement. And we're going to begin with Dr. MELINA ABDULLAH.
Hi, everybody. I'm MELINA. Thanks for having me. Happy to be on with you. We just want to lift up how grateful we are in Black Lives Matter for our strong and deep partnership with UTLA. We've been doing work together for years. The leadership is members, several members of your leadership are members of Black Lives Matter as well. And we're just very grateful. So just to lift up that Black Lives Matter, and Los Angeles in particular, which is the first chapter of Black Lives Matter, is committed to ending state-sanctioned violence against Black people and by extension, all people. And so you just want me to go over that work, right? I know this, yeah, okay. And what we've been doing for the last 7 years is really addressing the way in which our system overinvests in police, the way in which policing puts a target on the backs of Black people, and working to disrupt those systems as we also seek to build Black communities. So we take an abolitionist stance, recognizing that policing as we know it descends from slave catching and has to be, we have to reimagine public safety completely rather than tinkering around the edges of a system of policing that was deliberately and intentionally designed to produce these outcomes. And outcomes like the murders of 618 people in Los Angeles County alone who were killed by police since 2013, since our current district attorney took office. So we understand that these outcomes include the theft of life of LAUSD students like AJ Weber, right? Like Jesse Romero, and also the parents and community members of these folks. And so what our attempt to do is, what we attempt to do is a couple of things. One, hold killer cops accountable, but 2, defund the police. And I know that some people are kind of grappling with that term. It's been polled. Lots of folks are saying, don't use the term defund. Let's talk about reimagine. I think that it's important that we're very clear about why we say what we say. This city spends about 54% of its general fund on police. That means money not going to things like mental health, things like housing, things like good jobs, things like parks and libraries. It also means what they're doing is spending on police to do things that they have no business doing. Just last week, the city proposed or actually ushered in the expansion of policing through their so-called community safety partnership, where they have police doing what your jobs should be, right? Tutoring our young people. I don't want my children tutored by police. I want my children tutored by educators, right? They have police, you know, in parks, we want youth workers in parks, not police. So the defund the police is essential to making sure that we have resources in our community. And so that's a lot of the work that we're doing. And we see it also moving into the schools. And we're so, so proud of our young people and to be partnered with UTLA, who's been successful in significantly defunding school police recently, and I don't have to tell you, but you know, recently cutting school police budget by 35% and ousting school police from the campuses. And so we're well on our way towards transforming public safety, not just reimagining it, but ushering in the kind of public safety practices that actually keep our people and our children especially safe.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Patrice, would you take a minute and tell us a little bit about the work you're engaging in?
Sure. I am dealing with a bit of a technology crisis, so I'm going to answer this question on my phone and then try to hop back on my computer. I am grateful for this time with y'all, and thank you, Melina, for so eloquently breaking down what we believe inside of Black Lives Matter. I think, you know, when Alicia Opal and I started BLM 7 years ago, the vision was to massify the movement for Black lives, to massify this understanding of what Black Lives Matter is, and for it to permeate every single part of our culture. While we focus on the issues of state violence, we do see state violence as more than just police interactions with Black communities. We also see state violence as Black people having no access to food or housing. We see state violence as living in a moment in a pandemic and Black people having one of the highest rates of death. We see state violence as Black women unable to fulfill their labor and delivery because of maternal mortality and morbidity, really because of racism, no matter their class status. And so our work is to have a new kind of conversation about anti-Black racism and its impacts on Black people and on our country and on our globe. And so we've spent a lot of time defining what Black Lives Matter is. And I think in this moment, what people are now seeing is what we stand for and what we're fighting for. And our work around reimagining public safety, around calling for the defund and the abolition of policing as we know it, and incarceration as we know it, and a re-evaluation of what does it mean to bring true dignity, true safety, true healing for our communities, and what is it going to take? And we understand that it's going to take lots of time and energy from the people, but also lots of time and energy from elected officials and appointed officials to change 400 years of racism, 400 years of institutional racism. You can't get rid of that in one movement, even two movements, or multiple movements. We have to be consistent, even when the journalists step away from us, even when there are no folks with their cameras. It's our work, all of us who are on this call. It is all of our jobs to show up for this moment and to continue to show up for this moment. And so that is what we've been doing. And as you know, if you've been in LA, you know that BLM-LA has not stopped. People may have discovered them, but they've been around and they have challenged both what's happening here with LAUSD and the powerful victories this team has been able to come to because of the relationships and the connections and the deep commitment to Black lives and Black children. But we've also seen them at the county level and their challenge against our district attorney. We've also seen them at the city level and their challenge against the LAPD. And so we have to give it up to the work of Black organizers and Black women who have stayed and continue to stay the course. And here today, right, 55 years later, the Voting Rights Act was passed 55 years ago today. And it was Black women who ushered that in. It was women like Fannie Lou Hamer who ushered that in. And so I'm very grateful to be able to be a part of that long legacy and to be able to be in conversation with each of you around this moment and this opportunity.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and hand it over to Kendrick Sampson to talk about his work.
Lord, I hate introducing myself, but I'm like, what do I say? No, I'm Kendrick Sampson. I'm co-founder of an organization or a nonprofit initiative called Build Power. I'm an actor, activist. BLMLA was my introduction into like grassroots activism, my political home, about probably 5 years ago now. And you know, I kind of had my own journey into using my platform, as I believe we are here on this earth, to use utilize whatever privilege we have to uplift and seek liberation and fight for liberation for the most vulnerable, and add whatever privilege we have into this fight. So my own journey, utilizing my platform and making some big mistakes along the way, stupid shit, and great, you know, successes and great partnerships and all that kind of stuff, and just wanted to refine that into a training ground or in a community to organize Hollywood for liberation. And so me, Mike De La Rocha, and Tia Osho co-founded Build Power and partnered with a bunch of really dope people for our board and to lift up grassroots and community organizing, and learn from organizers like MELINA and PATRISSE, Dr. MELINA and PATRISSE, and figure out how we can transfer what we're learning there. One, to build those relationships so that Hollywood has a closer relationship to the community and organizers, so that they can stop fucking up the work of organizers. But also like to make sure that we learn from the ground and start to organize in Hollywood as opposed to just react. So trying to institute institutional liberation instead of institutional oppression, right? So that's what we're working on.
Can I add something to Kendrick's introduction of himself? So he's downplaying like his role. So when he said we're his political home and he does this work, and he's downplaying what he does. Kendrick is an actor. That's his profession. But his calling is doing this work. And so he's not an actor who pops up and does a celebrity appearance here and there. Every single Wednesday, he's in front of Jackie Lacey's office demanding that she steps down. Every single protest that we organize, Kendrick is there, he's present, he's not there for a camera, but he will use his platform to make sure our messages get across. He's there with the young people as they're talking about ousting school police. And so I just want to lift up that he is a masterful organizer and very committed liberator in his own right.
Thank you. Thank you.
And speaking of young people, Sarah, tell us about the work you've been doing while you're still in high school.
So hey y'all, it's an honor to be here. UTLA has been a great supporter of the work that Students Deserve has been doing. And again, my name is Sarah DJATO. I'm a rising senior at Dorsey High School, and I've been a leader in Students Deserve for the last few years. Our broad fight in Students Deserve is to make Black Lives Matter in schools. We've done that through our fight to end random searches, which ended the LAUSD policy of taking students out of class every day to search us for weapons. The policy targeted Black and Muslim youth like myself, and we fought to end it in June of last year and won. Then we launched the fight to end and ban pepper spray. Over the last year, school police pepper sprayed Black students at 5 different schools including at Dorsey. And this year, we waged the fight to defund LA school police. Last month, we won a 35% cut to the largest school police department in the nation through massive pressure, major actions in the streets and at the boardroom over and over and over again. But we're not satisfied with this $25 million cut. Even just this week, we kept up the pressure. We delivered a letter to Superintendent Buettner challenging him on how Black students are treated by police in LAUSD, and our delivery letter turned into an occupying of LAUSD headquarters. But through all of our organization, we've solidified that our work won't be finished until we get what we want.
Thank you, Sarah.
We're now gonna open up questions for the panel. I think Georgia, you got the first one.
All right. So, and this is for all the panelists. What would it look like to make Black Lives Matter in schools? And we can let's start with Sarah, since she's in school.
Making Black Lives Matter in schools looks police-free. And it also looks like Black students receiving the resources that they need, whether that be counseling and transformative spaces or laptops and hotspots. The organizing Students Deserve does is not only in the streets, like we've launched our campaign to defund LA school police to show that it's like a deeply felt issue. In June, like we organized a survey within like 5 days and got 5,000 LAUSD students, both current and former students, to take and answer questions about their experiences with LA school police. And we found that 85% of students had negative experiences with school police, which included being followed, handcuffed, harassed, sexually harassed. We also found that 86% of students wanted the school police completely defunded, and 88% of Black students wanted school police fully defunded. We used those results to show the LA School Board that we were not just like a small group of activists, but we represented what Black students were experiencing collectively on a daily. And we use this organizing to build our actions even larger to press the school board to get off the fence and stand for Black lives and cut $25 million from school police and redirect it towards services for Black students. But the fight to make Black Lives Matter in schools still continues. And it looks like fighting to push for the complete defunding of school police, because police don't make schools safe for Black students, for Black youth. And it also looks like spending that $70 million that they have in their budget on PSWs, on college counselors, on unarmed campus aides and ethnic studies, things that actually serve Black students.
Thank you, Sarah. Same question goes to Patrisse.
I mean, I don't think I could say it any better than Sarah did. Sarah broke it all the way down. I want to ditto everything that Sarah shared, and I was just gonna say that I feel proud to say that I deeply believe that the work that UTLA is doing, the work that Students Deserve is doing, is actually the work of making Black Lives Matter in schools. I remember the first Black Lives Matter in Schools conference. And I remember those early conversations about Black students and their needs, and how I went through LAUSD. I remember feeling neglected. I remember feeling like who had our backs. And so to see the leadership coming out from students in particular is deeply inspiring and exactly what we need. And I think that all of the demands that have come out of Students Deserve, in particular around community schools, the demand to get cops out of schools, the early demand to stop frisky random searches. I mean, those are the kinds of demands that we need to usher in. And then, as Sarah said earlier, I literally feel like all of us are just going to echo what Sarah said. So this is going to be a praise campaign for you, Sarah. You know, the push forward, as we always talk about in our movement, what we need to get rid of, we are simultaneously talking about what we need to put in place. And so all of the list of things that Sarah named around what must be put in place to actually preserve Black life, Black children's lives in particular, I agree with wholeheartedly. We have so much to lose if we don't center Black children in schools, if we don't center them in LAUSD schools in particular. We have so much to lose, and we have so much more to gain when we actually center Black children. And I think I am proud to be on a panel and in the middle of a fight where that's actually happening. We can't say that everywhere. We cannot say that. I couldn't have said that 5 years ago or 10 years ago about this work. And so it feels almost like we're in a moment of celebration. And yes, we have so much more work to do, but in relationship to what I've seen happen over and over again with young Black children in particular, in relationship to LAUSD and the fight to push that board, so much of it is actualizing, and that we should celebrate.
Thank you, Patrice. Kendrick, you get to tell us, what would making Black Lives Matter in schools look like?
I think, well, I mean, I don't know how I follow, but I think I'm gonna echo everything that Sarah says, or I will endorse everything that Sarah said and Patrice. And I think, a world free of police terror, and just really emboldened by community and community solutions, and making sure that they have the proper counseling available to them, and infrastructure, and that I think the only thing that I can really add is a personal belief in mine that they had that, and I think a lot of people share this, that we need to change what is deemed essential in education. And just, there are cultural boundaries to what is deemed essential, and white supremacy has a huge role in that. And I think that what we learn about ourselves and our culture as kids should be assessed and prioritized, specific ethnic, studies, even for kids down to, kindergarten. You need to figure out how kids should be individually taught, and I also think that things like art should be deemed essential, and financial planning and wellness, and not just like these, I don't know, what I learned in school did not prepare me for life. And I think that, it didn't embolden my identity, and make me feel supported. Didn't add into me loving myself anymore, and definitely didn't prepare me financially or in art for me. I'm an actor and a storyteller, a filmmaker, and art is always seen as like this extracurricular activity, which, especially when it's put outside of school, or the first to be defunded or whatever, one of the first programs to be funded, and so is health, right? Actual wellness, then it becomes an elite thing that, wealthy people and white folks can afford. And then you see the art spaces that inform our communication and our lives and our culture as very white spaces and very elite things that only a few Black people can afford. And we are some of the best communicators and some of the best artists, and our art is devalued, and so is our health and our wellness. I just think, and also community organizing should be deemed essential, learning in our schools. So there's certain things that I believe that we should be prioritizing and completely restructuring the way just the way that our education is structured is, you know, colonized and founded in oppression. So we've got too much to change, but I think the foundation of changing that is happening right now with the work that UTLA and BLM Youth and all these and Students Deserve and Sarah are doing, that the youth are leading.
Thank you. And everyone kind of brought up ethnic studies as well. So I kind of want to frame this before we hand it over to Melina, because ethnic studies has come up a lot as far as a goal, definitely when we're talking about making Black Lives Matter in schools. And I know we've struggled with it in LAUSD. It's still not a graduation requirement. We've really struggled with this. So really, what does an ethnic studies program entail, and what could it look like, you know, early ed through high school and even into adult ed? Like, what could it look like? So I'm going to hand it over to you, Melina.
Sure. So, and thank you for asking. And I'll just add that when we talk about making Black Lives Matter in schools, I think that the work that you all are doing in Students Deserve, UTLA, Black Lives Matter Youth Vanguard is just incredible. Sarah, I really appreciate the way in which you all as students are visionary. You're not allowing the barriers and confines of what exists to be what you call for. And I think that that's what happens when, before the world weighs you down and say, just, you know, think about what you can win. You're willing to be imaginative and audacious and say, we don't want police on our campus, point blank, period, right? And be quick about it too, right? Like, do it now. You know, no, we're not developing a 4-year or 5-year plan. We want it now. And I love that. And I think that getting to the question of ethnic studies, that's what's embedded in ethnic studies. So a lot of people think that ethnic studies is just about correcting the record. It's absolutely about correcting records. It's absolutely about pushing back against, you all have to teach, you know, your primary school, elementary school teachers are teaching this mandatory lesson on the damn missions. I'm also a mother of 3 LAUSD children. And what is that, 4th grade or 5th grade, that these kids have to build a mission project? Do you realize how racist that is, right? And my oldest daughter, I remember when she did the project, we talked a lot about it. And she just expanded her mission to include, well, where were the indigenous people? And they were kept outside like they were pigs, right? Like they were livestock, right? And then she wrote her essay to talk about what it means to be colonized, and actually got dinged for it because her teacher said that you were supposed to write on missions, not the treatment of indigenous people. And we went in and we had a really good conversation with her teacher. Her teacher changed her grade, but also changed her understanding of what the missions meant to the indigenous people of this land, right? So it's about correcting records. Ethnic studies is about correcting records, but more than being just about correcting records, we have to remember that ethnic studies is the only set of disciplines that actually comes out of community organizing, not out of institutions. And so that means it is a practice, a praxis of decolonizing your classroom. So when Sarah walks in, it's not just about depositing information and making you regurgitate it, right? It's more about, what are you walking in with? What did you learn from your mother and your grandmother? What did you learn from your own lived experiences? What are your visions, and what is it that you're willing to do work in this world? What work are you willing to do in this world? So there's a whole different pedagogy, right? But there's also a whole different purpose. The reason that we're teaching you this, the reason that we're approaching the classroom space in the way that we are, is so that you can go out and be of benefit to your community, so that you can go out and transform the world that you live in. So it's not an accident that you know, the institution is pushing back against ethnic studies. I think we technically passed the ethnic studies requirement in LAUSD in 2015, right? 2014, 2015, 2015. But it hasn't been implemented. You know why? Because they don't want it to be implemented, because ethnic studies is a challenge to the existing institution and the existing system. But we're not going to stop fighting for an authentic ethnic studies, because what they will try to do is water it down. They'll try to say ethnic studies should teach about, and this is some of the debates we're having now, should teach about all ethnic groups, including white ethnics, right? No, ethnic studies is about the 4 historically marginalized and oppressed groups who've been written out of the curriculum, right? And about asserting our power, right? As Black people, as Latinx folks, as Indigenous folks, as Asian folks, API folks, right? And so that's the work that we're doing, and we're not willing to give up what authentic ethnic studies is. And I'll just end with this. Ethnic studies has the power to not only change lives, but to save lives, right? So I'm not only a professor of Pan-African studies, I'm also a beneficiary of Black studies. I went to the only high school in the nation at the time that had a Black studies department, Berkeley High School. And as I was being pulled, this is in the early 90s, as I was being pulled by the crack cocaine epidemic that had hit my East Oakland neighborhood really hard, it was being in Mr. Navy's Black Studies class that planted seeds that enabled me, even as one who dropped out of traditional high school, to go on and earn undergrad degree at Howard and a PhD from USC, and understand that deepening my education is what would allow me to contribute to my community. So ethnic studies is vital. I could go on forever, and I'm sorry for going on as long as I did, but thank you for asking the question, Erica.
Awesome. I'm going to pose the next question to Sarah first. So there have been numerous statistics and research about the overcriminalization of our youth of color in schools and how that pushes them into the school to prison pipeline. So what do you see as our role as educators in contributing to and or in disrupting that?
I love this question. So I'm going to bring it back to the survey that we conducted in Students Deserve, which shows the urgent need for change. So let me be clear to all the teachers and educators watching this. I want more teachers to support the organizing that we do in Students Deserve, or just organizing period, the organizing that BLMLA does, or Black Lives Matter as a whole does, particularly teachers, particularly teachers of color, and especially Black teachers, to support the leadership of Black youth in this movement. They need to get involved and support the work of helping us expand all over the city. So, and when that happens, and if that happens, we can build a movement that we need in order to abolish the school to prison pipeline. If you want to get trained on how to support this work as a teacher, reach us on Facebook at #StudentsDeserve, or on our Instagram at LA_StudentsDeserve. We can help you out with that. And it needs to happen ASAP. So.
No waiting. Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing. And we are going to take some questions from our audience, and we've got some great questions for you.
All right, so up first from a member of the audience, how do we help those teachers who think BLM promotes violence and that defunding police is unthinkable? And anyone can kind of jump in and take this.
I was waiting for Patrice to hop on. That's her question for sure. I think her technology may be messing up. I can hop in on that. I think that it's important to have continued conversations, constantly talk about what Black Lives Matter is, lifting up and struggling for the liberation of Black people doesn't mean that we're pushing back against anyone else. What we're pushing back against is white supremacy. Patrice, did you hear the question? Because this is really your question.
Sorry, my technology is trash today. I apologize, everybody. What was the question?
All good. We can roll with tech difficulties. How do we help those teachers who think BLM promotes violence and that defunding police is unthinkable?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I mean, you know, Sarah, just thank you for what you named earlier in the call for your teachers to be more present, and calling Black teachers in particular to be more present for not just this movement, but the movement that's happening across the city, the county, the state, and the country and the world. I think the first thing that we do in calling in teachers to show up for this moment is we have to create spaces where we can have honest dialogue, where we can have courageous conversations about what this movement means. And so obviously this webinar is one of those things. We're creating more space for people to get understanding of what it means. So that's one phase. The second phase is as you begin to learn about institutional racism, institutional sexism and ableism, and all the ways in which the isms impact your classroom and impact your ability to do your job, because that's how you should really think about it. Racism impacts your ability to do your job. And so to combat racism, to challenge it, to show up for Black students who are trying to not just make a better classroom, a better institution for themselves, but really for all the students involved, that is also your job as an educator. Your job as an educator is to continue to understand that you're on your own journey, just as much as your students are on your own journey. One of my teachers told me that he is not the teacher, he is the student. And we are his teachers. Many folks know Vitali, part of UTLA, educator. And I've known Vitali since I was 16 years old. And so I took that very seriously. Our students take what we say to them very seriously, whether it is negative or positive. And so the kind of role we play on their lives is often a much bigger role than their own parents, because they're seeing you majority of the day. And so the mantle or the call to action to step in to be an anti-racist educator, it should be an honor to do. It should be a call that isn't a burden, but rather an honor. MELINA says this all the time, our work is a sacred duty. And we should see teachers to see themselves as anti-racist educators, see this as a sacred duty, as a call to action that will not just change this current moment, but will reverberate for hundreds of years. And so that's, you know, how we lean into this moment as educators. But also, I think there's going to be people who don't believe. There are going to be educators who continue to be naysayers. And this is actually more of a conversation to administration. This is more of a conversation to how do we hold our educators, our administrators accountable for enacting racism and perpetuating racism. And while that wasn't the direct question you asked me, I feel like it's very important to name that as well, because yes, we will have people who show up to the moment. We will have educators who say, I am stepping into this honor, I'm stepping into this role, and I will do my best job, but I will show up all the ways that I can. And then we will have educators and administrators who are actually counter. We'll have parents who are counter to this. And that's a different kind of conversation. And I think we have to collectively decide how we hold our educators, our administrators accountable
for perpetuating and enacting racism. And that's really, really necessary, especially in these moments when young people are looking for ways to hold people accountable for harm caused. And I do think that conversation is also important.
And I'm going to jump in with the next question from the audience, because something Patrice just said is a perfect segue. And the question is, what can white teachers do to cross the bridge of anti-racism? To anyone.
I can pick up on that. And I'll just echo everything Patrice said, and also say to the students, sometimes what happens when you have these teachers who behave in this way, you feel invested in trying to change minds, right? When teachers are white and racist, don't feel like you have to invest in that work, right? You're not going to change their minds, right? And so protect yourself also in that space. Don't feel like you have to be constantly fighting for your right to be seen and to get your voice across. And this actually does relate to the question, because this is where we call on allies, right? This is where we call on accomplices. If you have white teachers, white friends, white folks in your circle who really want to be with you in this work, call them on it. They, you know, we're calling them in to do this work and put their bodies, their voices, and their resources on the line. What we did, I guess a year into Black Lives Matter, there was a call that I think it was Rosa Clemente who was the first to ask for this. White folks were showing up and being with us in space, but we needed them to put their bodies between us and the police, right? We needed them to be present in very real ways. And we have a tremendous team of allies in White People for Black Lives that many of you all know, who are deeply grounded with Black Lives Matter, who check in with us on an almost daily basis around what we're doing, but also free us from having to organize white people. One of the most exhausting things in the world is talking to white people about racism. I'm tired of doing that, right? And so we want them to educate each other, right? And so that's what they do in White People for Black Lives. They educate each other. We don't have to dry white tears, right? We ask white folks to be like John Brown and really do the real work. And so for teachers, white teachers who are committed to saying Black Lives Matter, I'm gonna use my little brother Kendrick's words, well, prove Black Lives Matter then, right? If you wanna say Black Lives Matter, prove Black Lives Matter and step up. And so that's what we'd like folks to do. Join White People for Black Lives. We have a great chapter in Los Angeles, around the country. They're showing up for racial justice. There's Alliance for White Anti-Racists everywhere. And it's not racist to organize yourself around anti-racism.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Sarah, as someone who is in school, who is interacting, what's your take on that question?
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Yes. So what can, oops, let me find the question.
I got it.
What can white teachers do to cross the bridge of anti-racism?
Well, I guess I'll be reiterating what my other all the panelists have been saying, which is, if you are going to be in the classroom and you're going to be teaching Black students, then you need to be knowledgeable of the fact, like, you have to be knowledgeable of our oppression, but you also have to highlight the resistance within that. I don't know who said it, but I'm going to quote them. Where oppression exists, it is always met with resistance. And so I believe that, you know, white teachers need to be able to highlight that, whether that be in a history class and an English class. You need to center Black liberation pedagogies any way you can, any way possible. So that means teaching us about, like, Fred Hampton or Frederick Douglass and the abolitionist movement. It means teaching us about indigenous peoples and their struggle for like land and dignity. So like I know my experiences within LAUSD, ethnic studies was always embedded because I've like gone to like predominantly Black schools, but like for the predominantly white schools, I haven't had that. I had that in like a formally ethnic studies class. So being able to incorporate that, being able to incorporate social justice and resistance in some way will be extremely helpful. But then again, you can't expect your students to answer a question that deals with Blackness because we already live that reality and it's extremely tiring. So we don't want to come to school and be the spokesperson for all Black people. You can't place that burden onto your students. You need to be able to teach other students who probably aren't of color about that and teach them how to be allies as well.
Come on and educate the educators, Sarah. You better educate.
Oh, man, I just want to uplift everything that you're saying, Sarah. And I just know, like, not only are you speaking to, you know, myself as a Black teacher, but I feel like one, the struggle I had as a Black student and the struggle many of us had as Black students, like you are taking up that fight in ways we didn't. And so it is inspiring to see. It gives me, I just had to take a pause for a second, but let's go into the next question, which kind of definitely is connected. What can a teacher do to make sure his or her students, or his or her Black students, know that they are heard and that they are cared for, other than, I guess, like the regular things we do? So what does that look like? What does it look like to walk into a classroom where you're both seen and heard? And you touched on it a bit, but Sarah, if you could just go ahead a little deeper. And then I'm going to add another question for you, because folks are really wondering why it is that, like, what led you and inspired you to step up as a student leader. So if you could take on both of those.
So the first question was centered on like what it looks like centering Black students.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It looks like giving them freedom to express themselves, giving them the tools and alternatives that are not often given to them. So I believe somebody mentioned like this is for creative expression. That is something deep to a lot of students. A lot of students express themselves through art, whether that be poetry, writing, drawing, and that is usually taken away from them. There's a lack of resources in schools, especially like mine. I know we don't have like drama club, or we don't have classes that are specific to different outlets, unless we're talking about like sports. So that looks like being a sponsor for Black students to be able to do that. Asking and recruiting students like, okay, if you want to do art, let's make this space for you. I'll be able to get these tools, these art supplies, whatever you need, and supporting them in that way. And then the second question, can you repeat that?
What inspired you to become a student organizer?
What inspired me? That's a really great question, because I can go everywhere with that. But I guess I can touch on how navigating through white spaces and then being in a predominantly Black school has like changed my vision and the way I thought about schools and the way I thought about Black people and Black liberation. Like my classmates, my friends are my biggest motivators. They're my greatest inspiration because I'm friends with everybody. I have friends in like honors classes. I have friends in magnet. I have friends who are behind on credits, who get harassed by school police on campus when they're going to school. I have friends who are affected by the racist policies. I myself am affected by these racist policies. Dress codes target me, police target me. And so when I think of like what inspires me to keep going is that I don't want that for myself, and I also don't want that for my friends or people in the future. And when I imagine the world in 10 years or 5 years, I imagine it being police free. And I dedicate myself to that vision and working towards having that be my reality. Yeah.
Yeah, I just got to put an exclamation point on something you said. And that is how at schools that are predominantly Black, sports programs are over-resourced when art programs are under-resourced. And that is a perfect example of systemic racism. Perfect example where as Black students, we can play in your games and we can give you a show, but you're not actually going to look at what our talents and supporting us in other ways that we can be successful. So I just wanted to really put a pin on that. I'm going to hand it over to Georgia for the next question, unless anyone else wanted to chime in.
I think also they can't control art in the way that they can control and profit off of sports in a very, slave reminiscent way. And so I think that there's a direct lineage into oppression. So yeah, I just want to echo that one, obviously, as well, I know Patrice is an artist as well, so I'm sure she echoes that shit too. Excuse my language.
I'm going to direct the next question to Kendrick. So, as an artist, how would you, using all your artistic talent, explain the Black Lives Matter movement to Latinx students?
Interesting. In all my artistic talent, I'm not sure if my artistic talent would aid that. Well, I mean, I guess it could. To Latinx students, I mean, it depends. I mean, are we talking about Black Latinx? I mean, the Latinx diaspora, if you will, is so vast. But I do want to say as well that, in terms of another question, that white educators need a relationship with community and with organizing, and people need to recognize, and I think Latinx and anybody who's not Black and Black folks, definitely Black folks, need to understand how the oppressor will frame the liberator and the liberation movements. The most dangerous people and systems will frame the liberation movements as the dangerous ones. And I think that's just really important to understand. As far as explaining to Latinx folks, I think, that racism is that there's so much colonization involved in Latin America, right? And understanding indigenous roots in the Latinx identity and the different and Black, the root of slavery and colonization of the Spanish colonization and learning their own identity, and in this country understanding that Black and Indigenous solidarity is imperative to true liberation, and that that our liberation is inextricably linked, right? And that as I always like to point to the Combahee River Collective taught, I think the most important thing is to understand that we have to reach to the bottom of all the intersections of oppression, and aim to liberate that person at the very bottom of all the layers of ableism and sexism and capitalism and racism and anti-Blackness. And if you're not considering all those layers and reaching down to the bottom to, even if it's just one person at the bottom of all those layers of oppression, then you're not doing it right. Because if you liberate that person, inevitably you have to dismantle all of those layers, right? But it doesn't work the other way around. So if you're not considering anti-Blackness in your struggle, then you're leaving anti-Blackness intact. You're, and neglecting and throwing a community under the bus. But I think that is important. And I think that, as you can see with a lot of Black Lives Matter protests and rallies, a lot of the families that are speaking are Latinx. So, because we know that Black folks' liberation is imperative to Latinx liberation as well. But I also, it's also a very nuanced conversation, because when I'm talking to my Black Latinx people, it's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, that's kind of, I think, general what I would do. But as far as art, I mean, there's so many ways that can play. We have to uplift each other's stories. I see myself as a storyteller, even through activism. That's my strength. Storytelling is art. But there's so many. I think that art is the most effective form of communication. It's also cathartic. And we have to incorporate that more. And I honestly believe that there's, as we hear over and over again, there is no revolution without art. So that is imperative to the struggle and to win.
Wow. I wish we could go on for another hour, but we can't. So at this point, I just want to hand it over to folks to give final thoughts. Any last minute things you want to definitely add to the conversation?
I'm happy to go first. Just final thoughts. I, again, am just very grateful to be in strong partnership with UTLA. I'm very grateful that you all have a union and a union leadership that's committed to liberatory education, that's committed to making freedom part of not just your classrooms, but your ongoing work. You have a brilliant, courageous president and leadership team. Love Erica and Georgia so much, and just so inspired by Cecily Myert-Cruz. And we look forward to continuing to do the work. We're also, I think all of us can say that we're most inspired by our young people, who often have way more courage and vision and audaciousness than we do. And so, Sarah, we're following your lead and the leads of people like Kalila and Amara and so many others who are doing just powerful work. And when we get this done, when we defund the police completely, I love quoting y'all, we want all of it. We're coming back for all of it, right? We want to defund the police completely on our campuses. We want to fund the things that actually build safe communities, safe schools, your nurses, your librarians, your counselors. And we're committed to standing with you, whatever you need, however you need us, we're there. And again, the final thing I'll do is just underscore what Patrisse started with, that Black Lives Matter is absolutely about ending police violence, but Black Lives Matter is also about affirming Black life and ending state-sanctioned violence wherever we find it. When they assail you, when they assault you, when they traumatize you in schools, that is state-sanctioned violence, and we're committed to eradicating it and imagining and building something different.
I can close with also deep gratitude. I want to especially shout out the students who have spent their time in the last several years, not just to get an education, but fight for their right for education. How challenging and painful must it be to have to make request of your faculty and your administration to believe you and to fight for you while you're also trying to get an adequate education. So a deep, deep bow to the Students Deserve team and all the work that you've put in to get us this far.
And I'll go next because I think we should end with Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, and UTLA. You know, to the kids, to the, you know, I call it Black Youth Vanguard, they hate it. I call them Black Baby Lives. But, you know, to all of them Black baby lives, because I just want y'all to know that we learn from y'all, and we are inspired by you, and you keep us going. And to educators, just, you know, we need to support educators more. But at the same time, I remember what it's like to have racist teachers and trying to start a petition to get them fired and going and telling on them and stuff. And it's a whole, like, it weighs on students. And so if you're not teaching liberation, if liberation is not a part of your framework for your education of these students and learning what anti-Blackness is and what anti-racism is and how to be a part of that movement, then I don't believe you're doing it right. And in order to do it, you have to be in community with liberators. You have to be in community with folks. In the liberation movement and be a part of this liberation movement. So anyway, I'm gonna shut up. Thank you, Sarah. I'm following your lead.
Okay, I guess I'll start off too with honoring all of y'all who've allowed me to be in this space and speak truth to any and everybody. I want to honor Patrisse and Melina for beginning this movement and leading it graciously and being Black women in power and being powerful. I love y'all so much, and you guys deeply inspire me. I guess I'm going to just do a lot of reiterating. I know defunding school police sounds radical, but it's not. Police do not create safety. They don't prevent school shootings. When they are on our campus, it means that Black students get handcuffed, triggered, traumatized. Black students get racially profiled. So why not take that $70 million budget and work towards dismantling that? Why not take that $70 million and spend it on 70 community schools each year? Spend it on, again, college counselors, PSWs at every single school for Black students in LAUSD. And so I ask every LAUSD teacher who is watching this to stand with us and allow yourselves to imagine schooling differently from what it's been. Instead of Black students getting policed, let's give them the PSWs and the college counselors, the ethnic studies, and the community school models. I ask all teachers to stand on the right side of history and support our fight to defund school police and fund Black futures, and fund futures that would allow our Black youth to thrive. And that is through art. And it can be through sports too, but let's focus on what allows them to express themselves healthily. I don't even know if that's a word, but allow them to express themselves, whether that be like through art or through sports. Give them a chance.
Amazing. So, all the conversations we're having now, all the information that we're sharing is with the goal of creating resource-rich, police-free schools where students are seen as scholars first and foremost. So a survey is going to pop up on your screen. And what this is asking you is, are you ready and willing to engage in this work? You're going to tell us, and then we will follow up with you individually, because as so many of our panelists have said, we are looking for allies, and as Sarah just said, you are being called in to do this work. So go on ahead, click, and submit.
All right. Well, we want to give it up for our amazing panel today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kendrick, Melina, Patrice, and Sarah. Thank you for taking your afternoon to spend with us. It's been absolutely amazing. You definitely gave us some things to not only think about, but also some really, really good help for our soul as well. So we just really want to thank you. So we have an amazing day tomorrow. We will hear from Dr. Bettina Love in the webinar. She is an amazing researcher and author. You do not want to miss that. And then after that, we're going to break into our area meetings. So we will see you back tomorrow. But before we go, let's go ahead and hear from the teachers unions from Bakersfield and Santa Ana. Thank you so much.
Hello, UTLA. My name is Steve Comstock. I'm the president of the Bakersfield Elementary Teachers Association, BETA, and I want to say congratulations on your leadership conference. And I want to say a few words to say thank you very much for all the leadership you guys have shown to the entire state of California and really the country when it comes to the events that have unfolded with your very successful strike that you guys took and really showed the way for the state of California and what leadership is about, and the leadership that you've taken in making sure that all people are treated equally here in our state and in our schools after the unfortunate murder of George Floyd. We look forward to working with your newest leader, Cicely Meyer-Cruz. Congratulations. And looking forward to working with CACS. BETA is the newest member, and learning from the leadership roles that we have seen exemplified from all of you at UTLA. You guys are an amazing group, and looking forward to continuing to work with our neighbors to the south. Thank you very much, and have a great conference.
Hello, UTLA. I'm Barbara Pearson, president of Santa Ana Educators Association here in Southern California. I want to wish you a successful and fruitful leadership conference. Your work at this conference will bleed into our work as an organized statewide coalition, strengthening our power as a collective voice. We truly do rise together. Have a great conference, UTLA.